Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
The late afternoon sun hung low over the Nevada basin, the light sharp and colorless as it hit the dry ground. Cole Maddox rode along the familiar trail toward his ranch with slow, steady movements, his horse's hooves thudding softly in the dust that lifted in thin clouds around them. The air felt dry and rough in his throat, and each breath carried the taste of grit. He shifted slightly in the saddle, rubbing a hand across his jaw where dust had gathered, trying to fight off the dull ache in his shoulders from a long day's ride. His eyes stayed on the line of cottonwoods in the distance, the markers he always checked first when coming home. They usually meant nothing more than the end of the day. But today, something tugged at his attention. A quick flicker of movement appeared near the split-rail fence. He frowned and slowed the horse without thinking, leaning forward just a bit. The movement wasn't shaped like livestock and didn't shift like a coyote. It stayed low, too still, too quiet. A small knot formed in his stomach. His land rarely saw visitors, and certainly not strangers without warning. As he approached, the shape sharpened in the evening light. A girl, maybe 8 years old, crouched near the fence. Her arms hugged her chest tightly. Her thin frame trembled with shallow breaths. She looked up only when his shadow crossed over her, her eyes wide and dark, full of panic and exhaustion. Her face was streaked with dust, her lips cracked, her hair tangled with dry grass. Her dress, Apache beadwork at the edges, was torn and cinched badly at the waist with a strip of leather, as if she had been running and grabbed anything she could to keep moving. Cole stopped the horse and slid down slowly, boots landing solid on the ground. He kept his hands visible, palms open, trying not to show how fast his heartbeat had risen. He wasn't afraid of the child. He was afraid of what made her look like that. "You hurt?" he asked, keeping his tone level and low. She didn't speak. She just shook her head once, small and stiff. Her eyes flicked past him toward the hills, her breathing breaking for a second as though she expected someone, or something, to follow. Cole followed her gaze and felt a thin line of tension pull through his back. Whatever scared her wasn't far away in her mind. He knew that look. He had seen it in adults fleeing raids, in soldiers who hadn't slept, and now in the eyes of a child who looked like she had walked farther than her body could handle. He crouched a little to meet her eye level. "You alone out here?" No answer, just another fragile shake of her head. Meaning no, she wasn't alone, or no, she didn't want to say. He didn't press her. Pressing people in that state usually made things worse. She needed safety first, not questions. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's get you out of the cold." When he reached for her, she flinched first, her shoulders jumping, but she didn't pull away. She was past running. Cole lifted her carefully, surprised by how little weight she had, and set her on the horse. Her hands clung to the saddle horn immediately, small fingers gripping as if the leather was the only thing holding her steady. He walked beside the horse instead of climbing up. He wanted her to feel control, not pressure. Her breathing slowed, but she kept glancing behind them, each time making his chest tighten a little more. Something bad had happened. Something recent. The cabin came into view as the sun dropped lower. Smoke rose from the chimney from the fire he had left banked that morning. Normally, that sight eased him. Today it didn't. Not with the child he didn't know leaning weakly against the saddle and danger pressing in from the unknown. By the time they reached the small porch, the girl's grip had loosened, fatigue taking over. Cole lifted her down gently. She let him, her body cold and limp against his arm. Inside, he set her near the stove and worked quickly, stirring the remaining embers until heat pushed into the room. The girl didn't speak. She watched him with that same silent fear, as if she expected him to turn her away or ask questions she wasn't ready to face. He didn't. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and pulled a chair closer to the warmth. "You're safe here," he said, unsure if she believed him, but needing to say it anyway. Her eyes softened just enough for him to see relief break through the fear. Cole stood near the window, staring out at the fading light, watching the hills while she drifted toward sleep. He kept turning over possibilities: lost family, raiders, pursuers, a tribe nearby, but each thought tightened his chest more. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know who might come looking. But he knew this. The child was terrified, exhausted, and needed someone to stand between her and whatever she'd fled. And for tonight, that someone had to be him. The cabin warmed slowly as dusk settled across the basin, the orange light from the stove pushing back the cold in uneven patches along the floor. Cole kept the flames steady, feeding the fire small pieces of kindling so the heat wouldn't startle the girl or make noise that might worry her. She sat wrapped in the blanket he'd given, legs pulled close to her chest, her eyes flicking around the room as if she were mapping every corner for safety. He moved carefully, avoiding sudden sounds, pulling a tin cup from the shelf and filling it with warm water. When he handed it to her, she hesitated before taking it, her fingers trembling more from nerves than exhaustion. "You can drink," he said quietly. She brought the cup to her lips, sipping slowly, her throat working hard with each swallow. Cole watched for signs of illness or injury, but all he saw was a child who had pushed herself far beyond what she should have. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She paused, gripping the cup tightly. Her voice, when it came, was thin and quiet. "Isla." He nodded once, letting her see he wasn't going to push her for more. "I'm Cole." Isla dipped her head, acknowledging him, then lowered her gaze back to the cup. He prepared food next, simple broth and a small piece of bread softened in warm water. The cabin filled with a light, earthy smell that eased the dryness in the air. Isla watched every motion, cautious but curious, her expression shifting between fear and relief. When he set the bowl in front of her, she froze again, waiting, judging, trying to decide if it was safe. Only when he stepped back a little did she allow herself a small bite. Her jaw moved slowly at first, then faster once she realized she could keep it down. Cole leaned against the table, arms crossed loosely, keeping enough distance that she didn't feel trapped. He let her eat without questions. If she wanted to speak, she would. After a few minutes, she stopped and looked toward the door, her brow tightening. "You expecting someone?" Cole asked in a low voice. She shook her head quickly, fear returning, her breath catching slightly. Cole followed her gaze to the door and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders. He didn't know who or what she feared, but he recognized the way she kept checking the shadows, like someone who had run from something still close behind her. Without saying anything, he walked to the door and slid the bolt into place with a soft click. Isla jumped at the sound, then relaxed slowly when she understood what he'd done. Her shoulders loosened, and her breaths evened out. She finished the last of the bread and set the bowl down carefully, almost apologetically, as if she worried he might be upset by the use of his food. "You did fine," he reassured her. Isla reached into the small pouch tied poorly at her waist. She pulled out a woven bracelet, thin, worn, decorated with beads that had clearly been touched 1,000 times. She held out to him with both hands, her expression serious. Cole didn't take it at first. "You don't have to give me anything." She pushed it forward again, her chin lifting slightly, insisting. He accepted it, feeling its texture, soft threads, chipped beads, something made with care. Something important enough to carry when she ran. "Thank you," he said quietly. Isla nodded once, satisfied, then wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. Cole laid an extra quilt near the stove and gestured toward it. "You can sleep here. It's warmest." She moved without argument, settling onto the blanket, her eyes still tracking him even as she lay down. Cole sat at the table afterward, sharpening a small knife out of habit more than need, keeping the scrape of metal steady and soft so it wouldn't unsettle her. She watched him until her eyes finally drifted shut. Once her breathing settled into the slow rhythm of sleep, Cole looked toward the door again, his jaw clenched. He had taken in a stranger, a child carrying fear that didn't come from nowhere. Something or someone had driven her here, and whatever it was, he had a feeling it wasn't finished. The sun came up harsh and direct the next morning, pushing a pale light across the open basin and slipping through the small cabin window in a single sharp line. Cole woke early the kind of early that came from unease rather than routine. He sat up slowly on his cot, listening for anything unusual. Movement outside, hoofbeats, voices, but the world stayed quiet except for the steady crackle of the stove he had kept burning low through the night. Isla was still asleep near the warmth, curled tightly under the quilt, her breathing soft and even. Seeing her rest so deeply eased him a little, but not enough to settle the tension in his chest. He pulled on his boots, shrugged into his worn coat, and stepped outside with his rifle in hand. Cold air hit him immediately, sharp and still. The ground held a thin layer of frost that crunched under his steps as he moved toward the fence line. He scanned the horizon first, habit, instinct, and caution all working together, then dropped his gaze to the dirt. Footprints, more than he expected, not from Isla alone, and not old enough to ignore. Cole crouched, touching the edge of a boot track that cut deep into the ground. It was fresh, yesterday afternoon, maybe evening, too close to the cabin for coincidence. Another print overlapped it, lighter but matching direction. 2 men at least, possibly more. They had come near his land, walked along the fence, then turned back toward the ridge. His jaw tightened. He didn't like strangers approaching his property without making themselves known, especially when a frightened child appeared on the same day. He straightened, eyes narrowing at the distant hills. Whoever made those tracks had been moving quickly, searching. A flash of anger stirred low in his chest. Not loud, not wild, but controlled, the kind he hadn't felt since losing his family. Someone had scared Isla badly enough to send her running through the basin. Someone had followed too close. He headed back to the cabin, boots crunching steadily over the frost, and paused at the door to calm himself. Isla didn't need to see anger, not even directed elsewhere. She had seen enough fear to last her a long time. Inside, the warmth hit again. Isla was awake, sitting up with the quilt around her shoulders. She looked at him with questioning eyes, not panicked like yesterday, but guarded. "You sleep all right?" he asked softly. She nodded once, but her gaze drifted toward the door as if she could sense something unsettled in him. Cole set the rifle against the wall and knelt near her so she didn't feel towered over. "You're safe here," he said, keeping his tone even. "Nothing's coming in." But Isla wasn't reassured. She tightened the blanket and looked toward the window, her breath picking up. She had seen him notice the tracks. Even without words, she could tell something was wrong. Cole debated telling her everything he'd found, but she was too young, too raw from whatever she'd fled. So he said only, "Some men passed by. They're gone now." Her shoulders jumped slightly, fear hitting hard enough to shake her control. She clenched her hands, breathing faster. Cole didn't reach out. He knew better than to crowd someone when panic rose, but he softened his voice. "They didn't see you," he added, "and they didn't come inside. You're safe." Isla swallowed hard, then nodded, though her eyes stayed wet. He stood and pulled out a small piece of bread and warm broth, setting them on the table. "Eat what you can. We'll take things slow today." She moved toward the food, still watching him in case he left again. To give her something grounding, something small and steady, he pointed to the bracelet she had given him last night. "This yours?" he asked gently. She nodded again. "I'll keep it safe," he said. "You don't have to worry about that." Something in her expression softened. Not trust, not yet, but a small shift toward comfort. After breakfast, Cole took her outside for a moment, holding her hand loosely so she could pull away if she wanted. The cold air hit her face, and she flinched, but she didn't back away. He showed her the horse, the chickens, the yard. He didn't mention the tracks. She didn't ask, but every few minutes she glanced toward the ridge, toward where the tracks led, toward where danger might still be waiting. Cole saw it each time, and each time he felt the same steady resolve build stronger in him. Whoever had chased her, whoever had made her run until she nearly collapsed at his fence, they wouldn't get anywhere near her again. The afternoon light thinned as the hours passed, settling into that pale quiet that came before evening. Cole worked near the barn, repairing a loose board with slow, controlled movements, but his mind kept drifting back to the tracks he'd seen in the morning. Whoever had circled his land had done it recently. Whoever they weren't wandering. They had a purpose, and he didn't like that it involved a frightened child now sleeping under his roof. Isla stayed close to the cabin door while he worked, holding a small tin cup of water with both hands. She wasn't shaking like the night before, but she still had that alert stillness of someone trying to judge how much safety the day could offer. Every time the wind shifted, she looked toward the ridge. Cole hammered another nail into place and paused to wipe sweat from his temple. That's when he noticed Isla stiffen sharply. Her grip tightened around the cup. Her eyes fixed on something behind him, something up on the ridge. Cole turned slowly, following her stare. A lone figure was descending the rocky slope, moving with effort. At first he reached for his rifle, instincts rising fast, but he stopped when the figure stepped into better light. It was a woman. Her steps were unsteady, one hand bracing against the rocks as she made her way down. She wore a deerskin dress decorated with tassels and beadwork, the hem torn, the sides dusty as if she'd traveled far without rest. Her hair, long and black, was braided tightly and decorated with feathers and worn leather ties. Her breathing looked heavy even from a distance. Isla gasped, not with fear this time, but with recognition. "Mother," she whispered, the word breaking out of her like something she'd been holding in for too long. Cole didn't move at first. Relief hit him, relief for the girl, but it mixed with new tension. If this woman was her mother, then Isla hadn't been wandering aimlessly. She'd been running to or from something, and her mother had been close behind. The woman reached the bottom of the slope, stumbled once, caught herself, then looked across the yard. Her eyes locked on Isla. They widened, filling with raw relief, so clear it stopped Cole's breath for a moment. Isla ran first, quick steps, small feet kicking up dust. The woman dropped to her knees despite the pain it clearly caused her and caught the girl in her arms with a strength born more from need than physical power. She held Isla tightly, pressing her face against her daughter's hair, closing her eyes as if grounding herself in the reality of the moment. Cole stepped forward then, slow and cautious, not wanting to intrude. When the woman finally looked up, her arms still around Isla, her expression shifted. Relief gave way to guarded assessment. Her eyes, dark and steady, traveled over Cole carefully, measuring him, trying to understand who he was and why her daughter was on his land. "My name is Taya," she said in a low, controlled voice. Her English carried the rhythm of her people, but was clear and firm. She straightened slightly, wincing at the movement, but hiding it quickly. I followed her tracks. Cole nodded once, keeping his posture easy. "She found my place last night. She was cold, hungry, scared. I gave her shelter." Taya glanced down at Isla, who still clung to her side, then back at Cole. Her jaw tightened for a brief second, a mix of gratitude and caution. The kind of caution that came from a life where trust could get someone killed. "You helped her," she said softly. It wasn't a question. She needed it. Taya's gaze drifted toward the ridge again, and Cole didn't miss the small shift in her breathing. The way her shoulders tensed when she looked back toward the direction she came from. There was something out there, something that made even a strong woman look over her shoulder. Cole took a small step back, giving them space. "You're both welcome inside. You look like you've been walking since dawn." Taya hesitated, not because she doubted the invitation, because accepting help meant lowering defenses. But Isla tugged gently at her dress, tired and hungry, and that settled her decision faster than anything Cole could have said. With a short nod, Taya rose, keeping a firm grip on her daughter. When she walked, Cole noticed the slight limp in her step, the silent wince each time her weight landed on her right leg. He also noticed she tried to hide it from Isla. Inside the cabin, the air grew warmer from the stove, and Isla sank onto the blanket she'd slept under the night before. Taya stayed, standing for a moment, scanning the room, making sure nothing threatened her daughter. Only when she felt certain did she finally sit near the stove, her breath shaking faintly from exhaustion she no longer had the strength to conceal. Cole watched quietly from the doorway. Isla wasn't lost anymore, but the danger that had driven both mother and child here. That part wasn't finished. Not yet. The cabin settled into a different kind of stillness, Once Taya stepped inside, a quiet that came not from emptiness, but from two exhausted people trying to understand whether they were truly safe. Cole kept his distance at first, leaning his rifle by the door and giving Taya space to sit without feeling watched. The stove warmed the room steadily, casting a soft glow along the wooden walls and the rough floorboards. Isla stayed close to her mother, her small hands gripping the side of Taya's dress as if afraid she might disappear if she let go. Taya brushed her fingers gently through Isla's hair, each movement slow and deliberate, but Cole could see the strain in her breathing. She held herself upright with discipline rather than comfort. "You both need food," Cole said, moving to the stove. His voice stayed calm, quiet, careful not to overwhelm either of them. Taya nodded once, but didn't speak. Her eyes followed him with a mixture of wariness and gratitude, as if she hadn't yet decided how safe he truly was but recognized that refusing help would drain what little strength she had left. He prepared what he had: broth with bits of meat, a small piece of bread softened in warm water, a handful of dried berries he kept for long rides. The smell filled the cabin, and Isla's stomach growled loud enough for her to startle at the noise. Cole set the bowls on the table, then stepped back. "Eat," he said gently. Isla moved first, climbing onto the chair and pulling the bowl close with shaky hands. She ate quickly, but not desperately this time, her body loosening as warmth spread through her. Taya remained standing for a moment, watching the girl, watching Cole, then finally taking a slow breath before sitting. The first spoonful hit her harder than she expected. Cole saw it in her face, the way her eyes closed briefly, the way her shoulders eased as the heat of the food reached her empty stomach. It wasn't pleasure she felt, just relief that bordered on pain. "You've been without food a while," Cole said, not accusing, just observing. Taya kept her eyes on her bowl. "We left our camp quickly. There was no time to take anything." Cole didn't ask why. Not yet. She wasn't ready. Halfway through the meal, Taya shifted in her seat, and a small tremor ran through her right leg. She tried to hide it by adjusting her posture, but the movement only made the strain more obvious. When she reached for her cup, her hand shook slightly, and she tightened her grip to steady it. "You're hurt," Cole said quietly. She stiffened, her jaw locked, as if she were deciding whether to deny it. "It's nothing," she replied, but the way she winced when she stood earlier had already told him enough. Cole retrieved a small tin from the shelf. Pine salve, simple but effective. He placed it on the table beside her without touching her or getting too close. "This helps with pain," he said. "Use it if you want." Taya stared at the tin as if it were something fragile. She didn't reach for it at first. She looked toward Isla, who had stopped eating to watch them with wide eyes. Only after seeing her daughter calm and fed did Taya finally pick up the salve, her fingers brushing against the metal lid in a way that showed hesitation rather than distrust. "Thank you," she said quietly. The two simple words had weight. They sounded like they cost her something to say. Isla finished eating and curled up near the stove, her head resting on her mother's thigh. Taya stroked the girl's cheek, but her gaze drifted toward the window. She kept checking the shadows outside, the edge of the yard, the ridge beyond. Even resting, she couldn't fully relax. Cole pulled a chair to the other side of the room, far enough to give her space, yet close enough to be reassuring if needed. He sat with his elbows on his knees, watching the fire build strength. After several minutes of silence, Taya finally spoke. "She ran because someone came to our camp." She didn't look up. Her fingers continued to move through Isla's hair. "Men, not from our people. Armed." Cole felt a cold line run down his spine. He didn't interrupt, letting her choose her pace. "They wanted something," she continued. "I don't know what. They weren't there long, but it was enough." She paused as if choosing her next words carefully. Isla hid. She fled when she saw one of them break into our shelter. Cole absorbed every detail quietly. The tightness in his chest returned, the same tightness he'd felt the morning he found the tracks. He knew what these kinds of men were capable of. He had seen enough of them on the frontier. "Did they see you leave?" Cole asked softly. "Yes," she said, "but they didn't catch us. I don't think they followed not far." Her voice lowered. "But I can't be certain." Cole nodded slowly. His decision settled somewhere deep in him, solid and immovable. "You can stay as long as you need," he said. "I don't let trouble near my door." Taya finally met his gaze, her eyes steady. She saw the truth in his tone. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering protection. Isla shifted in her sleep, curling closer to her mother. Taya adjusted the blanket around her and rested her hand gently on the girl's back. For the first time since she arrived, some of the tension left her posture. The danger behind them wasn't gone. But for tonight, mother and child had warmth, food, and walls around them, and a man willing to defend them without demanding anything in return. It wasn't trust yet, but it was the beginning of safety. The morning wind carried a colder bite than usual, the kind that made the air feel empty and sharp across the open basin. Cole stepped outside before the sun fully cleared the ridge, scanning the land out of habit, his rifle resting loosely in one hand. The frost from a night still clung to the fence rails, and the ground held a pale sheen that cracked under his boots as he walked. Inside the cabin, he could hear faint movement, Taya's stirring awake, Isla's soft voice asking for water, both sounds grounding him in a way he didn't expect. But the peace didn't settle long. Cole's stomach pulled tight when he looked toward the far end of the property. The dust rising there wasn't natural. It moved in a steady, deliberate way. Hoofbeats. More than one horse. Coming in fast. Cole's grip tightened around the rifle, his jaw clenching as he took a step forward, straining to see through the early light. 3 riders broke into view, coats flapping, hats low, guns at their sides. Men who looked like they didn't ride for conversation. He didn't call into the cabin, didn't want panic. Instead, he stepped up onto the porch and planted himself squarely in front of the door, shoulders set wide, rifle angled toward the ground, but very much ready. The riders slowed when they reached the fence line, not crossing it yet. The lead man shifted in his saddle, eyes sweeping the yard with an expression that held annoyance more than curiosity. "Morning," he called, voice carrying easily across the open space. "We're looking for a couple strays. An Apache woman and a girl. Pass this way." Cole didn't move. His expression stayed flat, calm, unreadable. "Haven't seen anyone cross here." The man squinted, studying Cole as if trying to read past the stillness in his face. "Tracks say otherwise." Cole shrugged once. Wind does strange things to tracks. A second rider leaned forward, spitting into the dirt. "Funny thing," he said, "the wind didn't change theirs much. Looked fresh. Real fresh." Cole felt heat rise under his skin, but he kept it buried. He had learned long ago that anger wasted energy. Calm held ground. "Not my business who passes," he replied. "My land's quiet. I keep it that way." The lead rider shifted in his saddle again, frustrated. He scanned the windows of the cabin, trying to see inside. Cole stepped forward half a pace, just enough to block the view. "You mind?" the rider asked sharply. "I do," Cole answered, tone flat, but leaving no room for misunderstanding. A long pause stretched between them, heavy and brittle. The horses snorted, hooves scraping lightly in the dirt. Finally, the lead man clicked his tongue. "If they come this way, you send word." Cole didn't respond. The man's jaw twitched, but he pulled the reins and turned his horse. The others followed, though one lingered a moment longer. His eyes narrowed as if trying to place Cole's face. Cole stared back without blinking. Eventually, the man spat again, kicked his horse, and rode off behind the others. Dust lifted slowly as they vanished behind the rise. Only when they disappeared did Cole exhale. He stepped backward into the doorway and closed the cabin door quietly. Inside, Taya stood near the stove, Isla clutched tight against her side. Cole wasn't sure how long they had been listening, but Taya's eyes told him she heard enough. Her breathing was shallow, her lips pressed into a tight line. "They found our camp," she said, voice low but steady. "They will keep searching." Isla's small fingers dug into her mother's dress, her fear rising again. Taya rested a calming hand on the girl's shoulder, though her own hands trembled faintly. Cole set the rifle near the door, his jaw tightening. "They didn't see anything here," he said. "They won't get another chance if I can help it." Taya studied him carefully, seeing the quiet resolve in his posture. Not loud, not reckless, just firm deliberate, final. "You took risks for us," she said. "I did what needed doing." Isla peeked up at him, her eyes wide but different than before. Less fear, more trust. Something inside Cole shifted at that look, something he hadn't felt in years, something he thought he had buried with the past. "We'll stay inside today," he said. "I'll keep watch." Taya nodded slowly, relief and fear tangled together in her expression. She wasn't used to relying on others. Trust wasn't something she gave easily. But the way she looked at Cole, steady, almost searching, told him she understood he meant every word. The danger wasn't gone. It had shape now. 3 men with quick tempers and quicker guns. But Cole wasn't the kind to run from threats. He was the kind to stand in front of them. The morning passed with a tense kind of quiet that settled into every corner of the cabin. The sunlight outside grew stronger, and dust drifted in faint lines past the windows, but no one stepped outdoors. Cole kept the door bolted, the rifle leaning within reach, and his eyes shifting toward the yard every few minutes as he listened for hoofbeats or voices. Nothing came, but the stillness felt too thin to trust fully. Inside, Isla sat at the small table with a wooden spoon, tracing shapes into the grain of the wood. She wasn't talking, but she wasn't trembling anymore either. The absence of shaking felt like progress. She raised her head every time Cole moved, watching him with a quiet attention that carried more comfort than fear now. Taya stayed near the stove, her injury forcing her to move slowly. She tried to hide the limp, straightening her posture whenever she realized Cole was looking, but each shift revealed the strain in her leg. She worked anyway, tidying the few items on the shelf, checking the blankets, helping Isla comb her hair with gentle strokes. Her hands moved with practiced care, but she winced now and then when she thought no one would notice. Cole noticed. By midday, he warmed a pot of water and poured it carefully into a bowl, setting it on the table. "You should clean the wound," he said. Taya looked up sharply, not angry, just guarded. "I can manage. You don't have to." His tone stayed even, not demanding, just steady. She hesitated a long moment before nodding. Isla helped by bringing a small cloth to her mother, watching each movement with serious eyes. Cole busied himself near the door to give them privacy, but he heard the occasional intake of breath when the water touched raw skin. Taya kept her face calm for Isla's sake, jaw clenched tightly. When she finished, she tied the cloth around her leg again and settled on the chair, her shoulders loosening slightly now that the worst of the pain had eased. "You shouldn't stand much today," Cole said. "I don't want to stay still," she replied, her voice quiet but edged with stubborn pride. He understood that more than she realized. Staying still made people feel vulnerable. Moving gave control, even if it hurt. "You can rest here and still keep watch," he offered, nodding toward the window. A faint breath left her, almost a laugh, but not quite. "You speak as if we're already a team." Cole didn't smile, but something softer passed through his eyes. Hard to ignore the truth of things. Isla climbed onto her mother's lap then, curling against her chest. Taya wrapped an arm around her instinctively, her fingers running along the girl's cheek. The cabin warmed in a way that had nothing to do with the stove. Hours passed quietly. Cole sat at the table, sharpening a tool, each scrape steady and rhythmic. Taya mended a tear in Isla's dress, hands working slowly but with care. Isla shifted between them, sometimes resting her head against her mother, sometimes watching Cole, sometimes tracing small circles into the wood floor with her toe. The danger outside felt distant for the first time, not gone but pushed back. Near evening, Cole stepped out onto the porch for a few minutes, scanning the land before the light faded. The cold air bit through his coat, but he stayed steady, watching the ridge where the riders had appeared. No movement, no dust, no silhouettes. When he stepped back inside, Taya looked up at him, her brows lifting in a silent question. "They're not here," he said, "but they'll look again." She nodded once, accepting the truth without fear, only readiness. Isla tugged at her mother's dress, then walked toward Cole slowly, her small steps uncertain but purposeful. She held out the bracelet he had returned earlier in the day, her only remaining possession from home. She didn't speak, just pressed it back into his palm as if acknowledging something she couldn't put into words. Cole looked down at it, then at her, then at Taya, who watched with a quiet, complicated emotion in her eyes, relief, gratitude, and something warmer, something careful and new. As night settled fully and the stove cast its glow through the darkening room, the three of them formed a quiet shape around the warmth. The outside world still carried danger, but the cabin now held something steady, something that felt like the early shape of trust. And trust, once seated, didn't fade easily. Morning came slowly, with a pale light spreading across the wooden floor and the faint crackle of the stove filling the cabin. No hoofbeats, no distant shouts, no dust rising on the horizon. Just the quiet rhythm of a place trying to return to normal, even if none of the people inside felt normal anymore. Cole stepped outside first, checking the yard with a practiced eye. Frost still clung to the edges of the fence posts, and the air smelled clean after a windless night. He moved along the perimeter, studying the ground for new tracks. There were none, only yesterday's prints, now softened at the edges by cold and time. He felt a slow breath ease out of his chest. Not full relief, just enough to loosen the tightness in his shoulders. When he returned to the cabin, Taya was awake and sitting near the stove, her injured legs stretched out carefully. Isla sat beside her, helping grind dried corn with a small stone bowl. Taya's movements were steadier today, but Cole could see the way she continually tested her weight before shifting. The injury wasn't gone, but she was adjusting to it with quiet endurance. Cole hung his coat on its peg. "I'll check the stable after breakfast," he said. Taya looked up, her eyes meeting his. "I'll help. You should rest that leg," he replied. Her chin lifted a little. "I've rested enough." Isla looked between them with a small spark of amusement, like she was witnessing two stubborn people try to out-stubborn each other. Cole exhaled softly and nodded once toward the table. "Eat first, then we'll see." Taya accepted that compromise, and the three of them shared a simple breakfast: corn mush, warm water, a few dried berries. Isla ate eagerly. Taya ate slowly, watching the window even while chewing. Cole noticed every glance. When they finished, Cole brought out 2 coats. Taya reached for one without hesitation. Her limp was noticeable but less severe now, and she didn't hide it the way she had before. Isla walked between them, holding both their hands as they stepped into the cold morning. At the stable, Taya brushed the horse with careful, steady strokes. Isla followed Cole around, inspecting every tool he touched. Cole found himself teaching without thinking: how to hold a nail, how to test a hinge, how to check for loose boards. Isla copied each movement like it was important work. Taya watched them with a look Cole hadn't seen from her yet. Not fear, not tension. Something softer. Something that came from seeing her daughter safe enough to learn again. When Cole hammered a board back into place, Taya spoke quietly behind him. "She hasn't been this calm since we left the mountains." He paused mid-swing, lowering the hammer. "Kids know when things settle. They also know when they don't," she said, her voice dipping lower. "And danger doesn't leave just because we want it to." Cole turned toward her slightly, meeting her gaze. "You think they'll come again?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Men like that don't stop after one search. They keep looking until they get what they came for." Cole nodded slowly, absorbing her certainty. He'd lived long enough to know she was right. Isla tugged at his sleeve then, pulling his attention back to her. She held a handful of nails she'd collected, proud of herself. Cole took them with a small nod. "You're good help," he said. Isla's eyes lit up, not with childish excitement, but with something deeper, something like belonging. The rest of the day moved quietly. Taya cooked beside him without asking permission. Isla followed him out to the yard, handing him tools with confidence. The cabin felt less like a shelter for strangers and more like a place shaped by the presence of 3 people learning to breathe in the same small space. Late in the afternoon, Cole gathered firewood from the edge of the yard. Taya joined him, standing close enough that their arms brushed once. A brief contact, but one that made both still for half a breath. She didn't step away. "Why help us?" she asked, voice low, steady. Cole placed a log on the pile before speaking. You were in trouble. I was here. That's not reason enough, she said. It is for me. Taya studied him, her eyes searching his face for something she hadn't yet named. I want to stay, she said finally, the words careful and heavy with meaning. Not just until danger passes. I want a place where Isla can grow, where I can breathe, where no one decides our fate but us. Cole swallowed, feeling that statement settle in his chest like a weight he didn't mind carrying. You're welcome here, he said, voice quiet but firm. Both of you. Taya's shoulders eased, the tension she always carried dropping a fraction. She stepped a little closer, her hand brushing his arm in a gesture so small it almost wasn't there. But he felt it, steady, warm, deliberate. Isla ran toward them then, laughing, and took both their hands. In that moment, something shifted, unspoken but real, forming slowly like dawn light, easing over the land. It wasn't safety yet. It wasn't a promise spoken aloud, but it was a choice, a beginning. And for the first time, all three of them felt it. The next days passed without a single sign of riders on the horizon. No dust trails, no hoofbeats, no strangers circling the fence line. The basin stayed quiet, and the stillness began to feel like something earned rather than borrowed. Cole kept watch every morning and again before dusk, but each time the land remained calm. Inside the cabin, life found a new rhythm, one built not on fear but on routine. Taya rose early with Isla, heating water and preparing small meals from the supplies Cole brought in from the smokehouse. She moved with steadier steps now, her limp nearly gone, though Cole still caught the faint tightness in her face when she bent too quickly or put pressure on the injured leg. Isla followed him everywhere he went, carrying tools, handing him nails, learning how to mend simple things around the property. Cole worked patiently, explaining each step in quiet words, and the girl absorbed every detail like it mattered. It reminded him of teaching younger soldiers long ago, before everything in his life fractured. But this, teaching a child how to care for a home instead of survive a battlefield, felt different, better, cleaner. In the late afternoons, Taya joined him in the yard, her posture lighter than when she first arrived. She repaired clothing, cleaned the saddle, helped with firewood, and checked the snares near the creek with practiced skill. She belonged beside the land in a way that felt natural, and Cole couldn't help watching the way she moved, quiet, capable, focused. One evening, he hammered the last plank into a small addition he'd built on the side of the cabin. Nothing fancy, just a second room big enough for 2 bedrolls and a shelf. Taya stood beside him, Isla leaning against her hip, watching as he drove the final nail. You didn't have to build this, Taya said. Cole laid the hammer down and wiped sweat from his brow. You two shouldn't be sleeping on the floor. This gives you space, a door you can close. He hesitated before adding, a place of your own. Taya ran her fingers over the new wood, her touch slow and thoughtful. Isla stepped inside first, looking around as if imagining where her blanket might go. Home, she whispered. The word hit Cole hard. It was the first time he heard her speak today, maybe the first word she'd said without fear sitting behind it. Taya looked at Cole then, her eyes fuller, steady. You've given us more than shelter. You're not a burden, he replied. I want you here. Her breath caught softly, just enough for him to notice. She stepped closer, her voice lowering. And we want to stay. A long, quiet stretch between them, warm and grounding. Cole didn't fill it with anything unnecessary. He simply held her gaze, letting the truth settle in the space between them. Taya reached out first, her hand resting gently on his arm. The touch was careful, deliberate, more honest than any words she could have spoken. Isla took his hand next, small fingers curling around his own, and for a moment, the three of them stood together in the doorway of the new room, connected in a way that felt strong and permanent, like the beginning of something that didn't need explanation. That night, they shared supper without tension. Isla fell asleep early, curled in her new space with a blanket pulled to her chin. Taya lingered near the stove, watching the firelight flicker against the walls. Cole sat across from her, elbows on the table, studying the calm settling over her features. She sleeps peacefully here, Taya said. So do you, Cole replied quietly. Taya looked down at her hands for a moment. Fear follows us from place to place, she said. But here it fades, not all at once, but enough. Cole leaned forward slightly. You're safe with me, both of you. Slowly, Taya stood and stepped toward him. The fire cast a soft glow along her face, warming her features. She rested her hand lightly against his jaw, her thumb brushing the rough line of stubble there. You've carried pain alone for too long, she said. So have you, he answered. Taya's breath trembled, not from fear, but from release. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, just a gentle, quiet closeness that said more than any kiss could. A promise formed through shared days, shared danger, and shared stillness. When she finally spoke again, her words were steady. We choose this place. We choose you. And I choose you both, Cole said, his voice low, certain. Outside, the night settled calm and silent over the basin. No riders came. No danger crept near the fence line. Only the soft warmth of a home being rebuilt. Piece by piece, moment by moment. Cole closed the door gently, shutting out the cold. Inside, 3 lives had woven themselves together not by accident, but by choice. By trust. By staying. And the future waiting beyond that quiet night felt full, steady, and theirs to keep.